Welcome everyone to video 1.2. This is part 8 of 10 of the tax company PC project. When we left off, we were kind of messing around with this Gantt chart, which is the project plan. And since then, I did actually figure out the problem. It's really not super important for your role as a help desk person. I just wanted you to just more understand that there are these things called Gantt charts, and that project managers and other people will be putting these together, and that they are useful. But just for the record, I ended up cleaning things up. I moved the columns of the tasks and the start and end date to a separate sheet to kind of keep things a little cleaner. And then I also formatted it so it shows the number of days that each task is taking. So right there, so you can just kind of visually see it. And I did figure out why it was kind of bunching everything together. I had to basically go into here on the axis parameter and change the bounds, basically, which is the parameters of how far it was spacing things out in. Because, to be honest, Gantt charts in Excel isn't quite as nice as Gantt charts in a real project management piece of software. Like, there's a thing called Microsoft Project, which is what a lot of project managers will use, and that one's a lot more robust and has a lot more features and whatnot. But this, Gantt chart in Excel, it does work too once you mess around with it. So, needless to say, this, when it works well, this is actually super valuable in that when you share this with a customer or whatever, they can very easily see that, oh, okay, so like the provisioning of the circuit takes 30 days. So you're going to start here. It's going to take, all the way through the end of the month to get done. Registering only takes 1 day, but they can see that you can't customize the router until the Comcast service is installed, right? Because obviously they don't give you the router until the circuit's done. But even though it takes 1 day, you got to wait until this is done, right? So that would be more of what they call a serial set of tasks. Like, this has to complete all the way, and then this can complete, right? But at the same time, in parallel, we can procure the desktops and the laptops, and so we can see that that takes roughly 2 weeks for them to arrive. And then, the Jet Direct card, for it to be procured and arrive, takes about 7 days. And then, I was allowing some wiggle room here in case something went wrong with shipping or whatever. And then it takes 2 days to install, as far as once it's received. And then the UPS, it takes about 2 days to install once it's been received. Procurement of QuickBooks, I was allocating about 5 days. And I'm going to do both. So you can see that they're both being done at the same time, right? They're starting on the same day, right up here on the first or second. So it's very easy to visually see this versus if you look at this. I mean, yeah, you can see the start and end date here, but it's much easier to view it this way. And then you can see like the Office 365 takes roughly 2 weeks. You can see that we're procuring the VoIP software here, and then we're setting it up here because you want to give enough time. The 2 days is in case, let's say you go into their web page and you say order this VoIP service and provision these phones or whatever, but it might take a few days for it to happen. And then once you do have the access you need, you might have to spend some time configuring everything. So I'm allowing a little over 2 weeks for that. And then because the customer didn't have a huge priority on the web page, just creating a web page from scratch, depending on how much customization he may want, could take up to about a month. Because if you have 20 pages on it versus 3 pages, I mean, this was just a guess. Now in reality, we would have had a whole different requirements gathering session about the web page itself, and that would have taken several days. But you already see that this little scenario has taken a long time to get to this point. So this is just to have you understand that to implement something is a lot of work, and to document everything, it takes time, but it's also very valuable. And knowing how to do it is really important, because these are the types of things that would allow customers to actually go with your service and pay for your service. So lots of value there. And then, it's roughly 6 days to stage and install the desktops and laptops, and we're doing both of those at the same time. So you can see that those are in parallel, right? So this, if you look at this, you can very easily, and you can make this a little bit smaller to make it fit. You can see that there's a lot of parallel tasks going on, right? There's all this stuff happening at the same time, and then the website is kind of pushed off, but it gives you a really easy way to kind of see which tasks are related to each other, which tasks are independent of each other, and which tasks are actually codependent on each other, like this and this, right? You can't do the router until you've ordered the circuit. You can't install the network printer card until you've actually procured it. So this was related to this, right? So they're dependent on each other. So just stuff like that. It is pretty useful. So most customers appreciate this kind of thing. You may not put together too many Gantt charts in your career as a help desk person, but it depends. If you're in a smaller help desk, you might do some project work and things like that. So you never know, and this is all really good experience. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to close out of this. So at this point, we're basically done with all of the deliverables that we need to. So I'm going to now copy this template, which again, you'll have to write this manually. This is just to save time on the video. And I'm going to send this out, and I'm going to pivot a little bit here, and I'm going to show you how to utilize a different email system. So we're going to use Outlook now instead of webmail, which you could easily end up using Outlook for most of your projects. But if you're a contractor, for example, and you're doing a short-term contract, you might be using webmail. So we like to cover both just in case. So let's get started with Outlook though, which Outlook is actually the more powerful of the two. There's a lot more features in Outlook, but it also requires you to have access to your desktop that Outlook is set up on, right? Or your laptop, whatever computer Outlook is set up on, versus the webmail is more functional because, or it's more flexible, I should say, because you can access it from anywhere, including your phone or your tablet or whatever it is, right? So first time you run Outlook, it's going to run the welcome to Outlook thing. So you do next. And you want to set up Outlook to connect to an email account. You want to say yes. So here I'm going to put in the name as TED Trainee. So we're going to connect as your actual email. So if you are Jim Swanson, put in Jim Swanson here. So here I'm going to put in ted.trainee at transcendit-mn.org. I'm going to put in the password. So this is the easiest way to do it versus doing it manually, because what's going to happen is once I hit next, it's going to go, the computer is going to go connect to this domain, and it's going to see what the mail server is for that domain, and it's going to see that it's hosted on Office 365, and then it's going to take me to that. So I'm going to hit next. So now it's searching for that particular domain. So you can see that it was able to connect to that and actually see behind the scenes. What it really did was it connected it through DNS, right? It was able to check and see like, oh, what the heck is transcendit-mn.org? Does it even exist? And then DNS would have this thing called an MX record, which is a mail record. And that mail record would say, oh, that is actually pointing at Office 365. And at that point, your computer behind the scenes connected to Office 365 and said, hey, does ted.trainee exist with this password? And it said yes. That mail server in Microsoft's data center, where Office 365 is hosted for this domain, said yes, so therefore I was able to connect. So now I hit finish, and it wants to restart Outlook, which is fine. So now I'm going to have to go to Outlook again. So now it's loading my profile that I just created. So the first time you're connecting to Outlook, there's a little bit of setup because it's creating that initial profile. But now we're in. So you can see that it's pulling up all the same emails that you had from before, right? So whether you access your email on Outlook or whether you access your email through the webmail, it's exactly the same. You won't see any emails any differently, right? So the reason is because, I'm going to show you in this diagram, you're running the Outlook client on your computer right here. What you're really connecting to behind the scenes is over the internet, you're connecting to the Microsoft Azure, which is their cloud-hosted solution. You're connecting to their Microsoft Exchange server, which you don't have any control over this. That's managed by them, right? That's part of the the whole value that companies are seeing in that is that they don't have to have this server, for example, in their data center. They don't have to manage that stuff, right? So instead of having this down here, which would be the other way to do it, you could have connected to an Exchange server that's in your own network, right? And then it would send the email out to the internet, to wherever. Instead of managing your own Exchange server, you are just simply connecting to an Exchange server that is in the cloud, which is hosted by Microsoft. And Microsoft's cloud solution is called Azure. Office 365 is like the overall term for their whole outsourced solution of both email, storage, which is the OneDrive thing, using their Office suite, like using Microsoft Word and Excel licensing in one place. So it's like a whole suite of products, right? But Azure is like the name of the cloud service. So Microsoft Azure is kind of how all this Office 365 stuff happens, and then Exchange is the email part. Now behind the scenes is also this thing called Active Directory. So when you created a user, well, you didn't create this user, but when we created the TED trainee or whatever your username is, behind the scenes, it actually creates a user in Active Directory. And so Active Directory is basically like, think of it as a database of users that have, and it has a way of organizing all these users as part of your transcendit-mn.org domain, right? So the users are maintained over here, and then those users have a mailbox that is sitting over here. So these two are talking to each other. And so when someone sends you an email, it comes in through the internet and goes into this particular Exchange server. So you're just viewing what's happening over here. The email isn't actually going to be, well, for the most part, the email isn't going to be sitting in your computer. Let's just go with that for now. There is this concept of Outlook will allow you to cache your emails. Caching just means like it temporarily will store some of your emails in this thing called an OST file, which is basically for offline storage. So that if you ever disconnect from the internet, you can still like view your old emails on your laptop or desktop or whatever, but for the most part, the emails are really sitting up here. You're just viewing them in the Outlook client. And that's why whether you launch Outlook or if you just launch a web page and you just go to portal.office.com, you're actually still just connecting to this Exchange server. So regardless of whether you use a web browser and connect to this or if you use the Outlook client and connect to this, either way you're going to see the exact same stuff. So that's a really, really important concept to learn, that no matter what, all of your emails are going to be backed up and stored here with Exchange in the cloud. So that's the nice thing. So that was just kind of a little bit of background as to kind of how Outlook works. So for example, if I was to TED trainee, so if I go to TED.trainee's email, which is right here, you can see I've got the same email that's unread, right? Signed proposal. So I could, for example, create a new folder, which I'm just going to create a folder called projects, for example. So I'm creating this on the webmail, but now because I'm actually just creating this on the server, even though I'm using this Outlook client, that folder actually just got created here. That was just an application that's connected to the server, right? So really everything's happening here. So now when I go into here, if I was to refresh, I'll be able to see that folder in here also. So if I was to hit send receive, and if I do send receive all folders, I should eventually see that folder in here also. There might be a certain gap in time where it might take a couple of minutes to show up, but it will. Because I did create that under TED trainee. I created the projects folder, yep, under inbox, yep. I'm gonna actually put that folder under the inbox folder. There we go. So let's just double check that now. So under inbox, there you see you have projects now. So everything is basically synchronized. So like I don't have anything in that folder, but let's say if I was to go into here and really I should create a subfolder. So I'm going to call it bills tax PC. So if I wanted to put all of the items related to bills tax PC, I'm going to put them in there. So this was just a summary that I got from trainee, so that's not really related to the project. This is related to bills, this is related to bills. This is related, well, this is the templates. Yeah, I guess that's related too. By the way, I'm hitting, the reason I'm able to select certain ones is I'm hitting control, so let me click out of this. So if you click one thing and you want to click another thing, right, normally when you click the next one, it'll just unselect the first one, right? But if you click the first one and then you hold down control and you click the other one, it'll highlight both, or it'll select both. So I'm going to go back and select everything that has to do with bills project. And then I'm going to, you can either select and drag it in this way, or you can actually do move to and basically move it this way, right? So I'm just going to choose to move it. I'm just going to drag it in here. So now look, it's all organized, right? So inside my inbox, I've got a projects and then bills tax PC. So all of the emails related to that are in a specific folder, which is way more organized. And now I just have my general emails in here. So that's a lot easier to look at, especially if you're working on multiple projects. Like let's say if you're working on 10 different projects, well, you might have hundreds of emails in here and it'd be very hard to know which email had to do with which project. So it's just a way to keep organized. So if I go over here now and I look in projects, you can see I have all of the same stuff. So even though I did it in webmail, I see the same thing in my Outlook. So it doesn't make any sense to have both open really. Like in a real world scenario, you're not going to have webmail open and Outlook at the same time. You're just most likely going to use Outlook. But now there's some things that are interesting where you would think that, okay, well, if everything is synchronized where it's all the same as far as webmail and Outlook, well, there's a few local things, like for example, when you create an email, notice you don't have a signature, right? So if you go to signature in here, there's nothing there. And that's because those are some of the few settings that are actually local to Outlook itself. So when you create a signature on the webmail, that is local to the webmail. It's only available for webmail stuff. And when you switch over to Outlook, you won't have a signature, and vice versa. But there's just a few settings like that. But aside from that, all of your actual emails and folders or whatever are always going to be the same. So just realize that. So I want to actually go ahead and set up a signature. So we can actually copy it from our webmail because we already did this. So I'm going to just copy this whole thing. And I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to put in a new signature. So I'm just going to call this TED Trainee. And I'm going to say thanks, and then this. So I'm going to apply the TED Trainee signature to new emails and also to replies. I think you can also customize like themes and colors and all this kind of stuff, but I don't really care about that stuff. I'm pretty basic, so I like to keep emails fairly straightforward from that perspective. So I do have the signature now, so I can apply it like that. So pretty easy. As far as writing emails, it's really the same thing, whether you're writing it in Outlook or the webmail. Outlook is probably it's definitely much easier to work with. It's more like using Word, where it's got a ton of extra formatting tools and whatnot. So webmail is kind of basic as far as formatting. Outlook is super functional, so that's why that's one of the many reasons why people tend to use Outlook if they can over using webmail. So going back to our scenario, we've got this boilerplate email we're going to send, which boilerplate just means like our standard email or template email. So, oh, whoops, actually, I am in Ted's email, so I don't want to send it from here. I'll be sending it to myself. So I'm going to actually send it from the trainee01 because that's the person that's updating his manager. So I'm going to close out of this. Don't want to save, no. So from trainee01. So I'm going to continue to use webmail for trainee01 just to keep things separated. I could have technically added multiple inboxes to Outlook. So that's another really cool feature of Outlook is I can actually go into File and then I can do Add Account right here. And then I could have added trainee01 at Transcend IT also in here. And then at that point, I would have had this TED.trainee and another connector right here, and it would have had trainee01, and I could have seen both inboxes in one place. And you can actually add 3, 4, or 5 or more emails in one place, right? So it's super powerful in that way, right? So instead of like on the webmail side, you'd have to open up, if you wanted to look at 4 different emails, you'd have to actually open up 4 different browsers, because webmail wise it doesn't like you having a trainee01 and a TED.trainee at Transcend IT on the same browser, because it thinks you're connecting to just one of them. And that's because of a thing called a cookie that it's keeping on the browser. It says like, oh, you're connected as trainee01. So if you try to go back to portal.office.com and connect to Transcend IT, it wants you just to connect to one user, which is tied with that cookie. So those are some of the limits about webmail, but you know, for the most part, if you're just doing basic things, you can pretty much do your job in webmail if you have to, but Outlook could become much faster and just more powerful. So just keep that in mind. So with that said, I'm going to send this email now from trainee01, where I'm going to paste that sample email. So I'm saying, you know, that the meetings went well and that Bill sent over the signed proposal, because he did, and things are moving along. The next things I need to do is to provide the statement of work, high-level design, and project plan. And that I want to basically get my manager's feedback. And peer review is just something where someone else would review your documents generally before you send them to a customer. So here I'm going to be placing them on the file server, so I need to send Bill the actual path. So the path is, I'm going to open up a new, so if you right click on here, you can do File Explorer. So that's going to be under Trainees, TED Trainee, Projects, Open, Bill's Tax Haven, Customer Deliverables. So I'm going to just copy that whole address as text, and I'm just going to put that in here. So at that point, you know, the customer can basically, or sorry, the TED trainee or manager can go check everything out that's in here. And so I'm saying, please feel free to check these out and basically get back to me. And generally, you're going to say you want to get these done or sent over to the customer by a certain date, so you need your manager to get back to you by a certain date. And here's, I'm going to say that I want to use the tracking feature of Word. So I'm not sure if you've learned about the tracking feature yet. I'm thinking you probably have from either the Accenture or Linda. So regardless, if you have seen it before, we're going to repeat it. If you haven't, then you're going to learn something new. And that's just a way that you can basically have someone make edits to a document, but you can actually see what edits they make. Because if they just change it and you don't see what they changed, it might not help you too much, because you might make that same mistake again, or maybe they misunderstood what you wrote and they make an edit to a document that they shouldn't, right? So that's why you want to ask people for feedback and get them to give you feedback and peer review your documents, but you want them to put in tracking so you can see what they did, and you can choose to either accept or not accept the changes that they proposed. So I'm just going to send this over to Ted, of course, and I'm just going to put in a subject of deliverables for Bill's Tax Haven. By the way, the subjects are actually really important, and the subjects should be written in a professional way, where you notice I'm using like uppercase letters, except for things like for or to. you want to be professional even in your subjects. Like a lot of people will send something like, you know, docs or something like that, you know, and I just think that's really rude because if your manager is really busy, the last thing you want to do is cause your manager to spend extra time trying to figure out what the heck is this email. You want to be able to look at an email just by the subject and know what's going on in that email. And then you can choose to open it later, let's say, and you can prioritize emails based on subjects if the subject is actually useful. If you just put in a subject of docs, well, that's not very useful. And no one really likes that, honestly. If your manager sends you an email without a good subject, that doesn't help you either, right? So in theory, everyone should have useful subjects in emails. For bills, tax, payment. Okay, so I think we're good. Deliverables, we got the email. Okay. Send. Okay. So here I've got. So another useful thing about Outlook versus the webmail is like you notice like you actually get this notification right here that showed up on the right hand corner of this new email. So it's just got a lot of nice little features like that where you can have like an audible sound and you can be a little pop-up that shows up. You've got this right here that shows you have unread email. So it's just much more friendly to use Outlook for so many reasons. And I haven't gotten into so many other features that Outlook has, which I think you've gone over some of these for some of the other curriculum you've done, but it's definitely pretty powerful. So here's the email. For some reason it's double spaced right here, which I don't like, but that's something we'll have to fix. So at this point, if I'm the manager, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to go to this location then, which I can just cheat and just put this in here and open. It just brings me right to that folder, which that's just, you know, a quick way of getting somewhere. So if someone sends you a path like that, a UNC path, sorry, not a UNC path, but just a file server path, as long as you have that same drive letter mapped, you can just literally copy this whole thing, go to run, and paste it in there and hit OK, and it'll just go there. Versus, let's say, like you just go into your T drive, go into trainees, and just, you know, navigating each subfolder. It just takes longer, right? So just keep that in mind. So if I'm TED trainee, the manager, I'm going to look at some of these documents and I'm just going to see if there's anything that stands out. Okay, so everything is looking good. They've got, so if I'm the manager, I'm like, okay, so he's using the template, he's got the title, he's got the document stuff, the table of contents looks good. I might try to update it just to make sure, because managers tend to double check things, right? So I'm going to do update entire thing, entire table. Okay, nothing changed. Good, I've got an introduction. Okay, that looks good. Objectives, the purpose, okay. Business processes, the new system, technology architecture. I'm going to just kind of scan this. Okay, it looks good. Okay. So I'm gonna, you know, notice here that, oh, wait a second, this doesn't have anything about the actual website itself, right? It has the hosting of the website and email, but it doesn't have anything to do with the development of the website. So I'm gonna add a line in here, Wix-based development of the Bills taxhaven.com website. You know, actually, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to cut that because I didn't enable tracking. So I'm going to do track changes. And so now I'm going to paste in that change. So notice it's like red right here. So that's where you can actually, if you click on it, it will show you what was added, basically, that, okay, this line wasn't there and it was added, right? You can see because it's underlined. If you go over here and click again, it just shows you the new line, and the fact that this red little offset line is here shows you that there was a change made right here. So that was part of like what was added or updated. I see that I have this diagram, which is great. Connectivity, okay. All right. So I'm just going to, at this point, save this. Well, it depends. Some people may save it as a different version. I'm actually going to save it as the same version because, I mean, we do have tracking enabled, so trainee 01 can see what changes were made. So I'm just going to save it and close out of it. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to look up the statement of work. Just going to double check that all this stuff looks good. And you know, the manager may not know every one of these steps that needs to happen, so they're just going to kind of eyeball it just to make sure all the major components are in there. And I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. They'll kind of give this a once over to make sure that these costs seem reasonable. Okay. Okay, and then you've got the signature boxes. Okay, so that seems fine also. And then, of course, the project plan. So I'm going to come in here and just see, okay, so what do we got? We've got a project plan that shows me the items that need to be done and how long they're taking. I can see which tasks are overlapping or which tasks are done in parallel, which tasks are interdependent of each other. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. This seems reasonable. I can see that the Wix hosting is happening much later after everything is done because it's a lower priority, just like the customer said. So, I mean, really, it's looking good. Just had one minor change on the high-level design. And that's really all your manager probably should have, is some minor changes, because if you have been on the same calls and you understand the process and you understand the templates and everything, like, in theory, they shouldn't be totally redoing your documents for you. It should be like just a second set of eyes, double checking a few things, and, you know, making a few edits, and that's it. So at this point, per our little canned template here, I'm going to reply back from the manager Ted, trainee to trainee 01, and just say that, you know, looked at the documents and made some minor updates, right? So now I'm going to send that through my Outlook, since I'm now going to be using Outlook. So I'm going to reply. It's all super intuitive, right? So I'm going to reply, and notice my signature is now here because I set it up. So I'm going to just paste, Control V. So I'm just literally saying, thanks for the update. I took a look at the documents and made some minor changes to retract. You have my approval to send the final version over to Bill for sign off. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit send here. So, I mean, I have my same sent folder and everything, just like any other email system, so I can go and look at my sent items. And you notice if you go to Outbox, there's nothing there, but this is where it went for a quick second. It sits in the Outbox and then it goes out the Exchange server. So when it's sitting in the Outbox, it's actually sitting on this server, and then it sends it out of this server, out the internet to the other mail server, wherever it's going. So all this is really happening here. It's just Outlook is a way to view what's happening over here. So at this point, if I go back to Trainee 01, I see the response from my manager. Thanks for the update. There's some minor updates to retract. Great. So now I'm going to go into my folder, and I'm going to see, okay, well, which documents were updated. And by the way, you can see, even using the date modified, that, okay, my manager must have made some changes to the high-level design or the project plan, the SOW, because the dates have changed, so that the timestamp has changed, versus this one has not, since I sent him the email. This is as of 2 days ago. So I'm just going to take a look at this one, and I'm going to review, and I'm going to go down and see, okay, which edits were made. I'm going to look at this and see, oh, okay, I hadn't added the Wix part, so that makes sense. That was something I had overlooked. And so I'm just going to go ahead and go to accept. And I'm going to say accept all changes and stop tracking. And then I'm going to save that. And I'm going to close out. So at this point, we're ready to actually send the email over to the customer. So I'm going to copy this sample email and just paste it in. Again, you're going to have to manually type this in. So this is from Trainee 01 to the customer, and then you're going to CC your manager. So I'm going to create a new email. And this is going to be customer, and then I'm going to CC Ted. I'm going to paste this email. And I'm saying, per our conversation, attached are all the deliverables for the project. The documents are as follows: a statement of work, a high-level design, and a project plan. I'd love to set up some time with you to discuss any questions you have prior to approval. What's your schedule look like? Please shoot over some dates and times that would work for you to get on a Webex. And the subject will be deliverables for project. Yep, looks good. I'm going to hit send. Oh, you know what? Actually, Outlook is pretty smart. It noticed that I must have said the word attached or attachments, but it didn't actually attach anything, which is a total amateur move. But luckily, Outlook is smart and saw that, so I'm going to hit don't send. And now I'm going to actually attach the documents that I meant to attach. So I'm going to go into attach, and we're going to attach from the computer instead of from the cloud. And then I'm going to browse over to the folder. So this is already connected to my T drive, right? So up here. So I'm going to go into customer deliverables, and I'm going to send the HLD. And again, you can hit control and then send the project plan and the SOW. Those are the 3 documents that I said I was going to send. So I'm going to hit open, so that's a quick way to attach all 3, right? So I got the SOW, I've got the HLD, and I've got the project plan. So that should do it. And I'm going to hit send. If you go to my sent items, there they are. So at this point, I should be able to see that over on the customer side. So I can see my, whoops. I just hit F5, so F5 will refresh. So now I can see the deliverables for project. So I can see that I got these documents, so now I'm going to review them real quick. So I'm going to just open this document. I'm going to preview it in the browser for this particular example. So I'm going to look through this as the customer this time. So I'm just going to look at this bill, and I'm going to just kind of like glance over it. I'm just going to skim it and just get a gist of it, because I'm not going to understand every bit of this, right? Because I'm not a technical person, but I'm just going to look for certain things like, okay, so there's the VoIP service, there's the smartphone or soft phone, there's Office 365, there's email, there's the storage, ADP, Lacert, so all that kind of stuff. I see that there's a diagram in here. And of course the signatures. So that makes sense. I'm going to then look at the SOW. I'm just going to explain all the different parts, or all the deliverables and rough due dates for them. So I'm just going to kind of look and see, okay, so I'm going to look for like some basic stuff like, okay, so all the staging and everything's going to be done by the 25th, and then the website is being done after that. Okay, they've got all the procurement and the installation and implementation steps. And I've got my costs, which I've already seen these costs because that was part of the original proposal. I also can see my payment terms are net 30. So, and here I can see that the signature pages are in here. So that makes sense. And then I'm going to look at this project plan. So here's an example of something that doesn't actually look very good if you're just previewing it. So some things just aren't going to look right unless you actually open them up. So I'm going to go ahead and save this or download this. So now it looks much better. So if I was to look at this as a customer, I can easily see, just like we did, how many days everything's going to take, which things are in parallel, which things are in serial nature, where this has to be done before the router can be done. I'm going to see that the Wix hosting and web development happens a little bit later, timeline-wise. So should be pretty much anything a customer would want to see at this point. So the only questions a customer should have would be probably things like, on the high-level design, what some of those steps were. And some customers may not even want to know this stuff, right? They just want to know that they might not want to actually read the HLD in detail because they may not care about the steps that you have to take. They just want it done. But you want to give those customers that do care an opportunity to see it. If they choose to get the file and not open it and just sign it, if they just sign the high-level design and the SOW, well, that's fine, right? But at least you want to give them the opportunity. And you want to give them an opportunity to ask questions or whatever, which is why we said, hey, can you provide some kind of feedback or let me know when you want to look over the documents in a Webex, right? In case the customer has questions. So typically the customer may take a while to actually review them, or they might have someone else review them also. So I'm just going to kind of follow that process. So I'm just going to reply back here. So I'm going to say reply to all. And I'm just going to paste this. Again, you'll have to actually type it in yourself. So I'm just going to say thanks for sending them over. You're right on time. I'll take a few days to read it over and get back to you regarding a date/time to review them, right? So I'm going to hit send. So now as over as trainee 01, I'm seeing this as a very good sign, right? So this is, showing me that the customer is appreciating my details. They're appreciating that I've been on time and I'm not, underestimating things. I've estimated things pretty accurately so far. And they're just going to take a couple days to review things. So that's looking good. Also, I can see that my manager is seeing this stuff too because the customer replied to all. So again, you can see how this preview showed up on the Outlook side. So that's one of the nice things about Outlook versus webmail. I have to actually go into it and actually refresh or just look at the folder. So it's not quite as nice, right, on the webmail side. So at this point, I'm ready to take the next step, right? So I guess just for confirmation, I'm going to reply back to Bill. So reply to all. So I'm just literally saying like, thanks, I'll wait to hear back from you. Because you don't want to leave the customer hanging. The customer always should know that you've received their email and that you acknowledge them, right? It's a little extra step. Some people don't do it, but I think it's a really good idea, and I think it's smart to always over communicate and let the customer know or your manager know that you received something from them and that you're working on it or that you're waiting for feedback from them. Again, here's that auto update from Outlook. So now the next step will be that the customer will now have reviewed everything and they're ready to actually move forward. And so they're going to propose a particular time. So I'm going to reply from the customer. So I'm going to reply to this. I'm going to click here and say reply to all. I'm going to paste it. Again, you'll have to actually manually type this. And I'm going to hit send. So here I'm seeing the email now from the customer, and the customer is saying, I'm available Monday or Tuesday from 2 to 5 Central Time. CST is Central Standard Time. And Thursday from 1 to 6. Please let me know if those time slots work. So at that point, you're going to basically pick one of those time slots and then let the customer know that. So here we go. So as trainee 01, I'm going to reply back to the customer. And you might be thinking like, man, like we're sitting here sending Ted trainee all these emails. We're blowing up his inbox. Isn't that kind of rude or whatever? But honestly, it's not. You would think that the manager doesn't want to know this stuff, but as a manager of a team, you want to see all of the emails, because as long as you're doing your job and the customer's happy, the manager's happy, right? And the manager is going to have to answer to his boss, who's probably a director or a VP or something like that. And they want to be able to quickly know if you are doing your job, right? Because Ted is probably managing a few different technicians, maybe 5, 6 different technicians. They're all working on multiple projects. So if you over communicate to Ted and you CC him on all of the emails to Bill, especially about like things moving forward, Ted isn't going to mind, because he's going to be organized. He's probably going to put all your emails into a certain folder in his Outlook, and it's going to be very easy for him to stay organized that way. But now he has an audit trail of everything that's happened on the project, so if he ever has to answer to someone else above him, he can easily explain what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit send. So now I'm going to go back as Bill again. So here the technician saying, you know, that they can do Tuesday from 3 to 5, and that they'll send over a Webex. So perfect. So at this point, you know, the next step is for the technician who is training 01 to send a Webex invite to the customer, and then you can also invite the manager. You can make it optional, and you're gonna basically just go over the questions, if there are any, on either the SOW or the HLD or the project plan, any of the documentation, because the end goal here is you want the customer to sign the statement of work. Because all of this stuff that you've done is for naught if they don't sign the SOW, because that's the only way that the customer is actually committing to paying for this project, right? Otherwise, all this time would be completely wasted. So this meeting is really important, and in theory, if you have done a good job up to this point, the customer shouldn't have a whole lot of questions, and it should be just more of a formality, like, yep, everything makes sense, or just like a few questions maybe on the HLD or something like that, and that's really it. So at this point, I'm going to send a Webex. So I'm going to launch my browser. I'm going to go to webex.com, and I'm going to sign in with Webex products. And I want you to do this whole process because I want you to feel very comfortable in Webex. You might be using Webex quite a bit actually to set up meetings, and you might actually even connect to people's computers using Webex, because you can share screens and whatnot. So it's useful for troubleshooting also. It's not just for meetings. So if you had never used Webex in a corporation before, people would think that's really bizarre, because everyone in a corporation at some point or another has used Webex, like multiple times in a week usually. So it's time for work with a capital T and an exclamation mark at the end. So I'm going to sign in. Yeah, it's making me change the old password here, so I'm going to change it to something new. This was not expected, but hey, like I said before, you have to kind of roll with things in the IT world. Okay, so at this point I'm in Webex and I'm going to schedule a meeting. So I'm going to call it deliverables review with Bill. So some things are kind of interesting where like spell check thinks that deliverables isn't a word, but it's actually used in the business world and especially in IT quite a bit. So sometimes, most of the time when it spell check thinks that this something isn't a word, it's right, but there are certain words that are just kind of used in certain sectors like IT that I guess isn't officially something in the Webster's dictionary, but it's actually still used. So if we were to go with this whole scenario, the actual time was Tuesday from 3 to 5, so I'm going to pick the same thing. So I'm going to say, so Tuesday would be here from 3 to 5. So I'm going to pick 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. And the length is 2 hours. So the nice thing about Webex is once you've typed someone's email, it'll autofill. So I can just pick that customer, and then I'm going to also send an invite to Ted, because you always want your manager at least to have the option to join if they want to. So that should do it. You can put an agenda of review deliverables for project. And that's it. So I'm going to schedule this. So notice it says when it's time, start your meeting. That's because it's in a future date. So you shouldn't really start the meeting now because it's not even supposed to be started until several days from now. So as the customer, I'm going to get a Webex invite. So right here, I can see that on the 20th, I'm going to be getting a Webex, or I'm going to be joining a Webex. So I'm just going to skip this step for now because, I mean, we've been on a Webex before and we understand what that looks like. It's not super complicated. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to skip that, and we're just going to talk as if we were on the Webex. So at this point, I'm going to switch into my awesome characters that we, I'm sure, just love because my accents are totally on point and I've got a future in Hollywood here. So clearly, right? So I'm going to now go into my whole deep voice as Bill, and
I'm also going to talk like this for Trainee 01 because it's an easy way to actually distinguish the difference. So here we go.
And switching out of character, so just to go over what we're covering, it's, asking questions of the customer, answered, and then setting the precedents or setting expectations that the customer will sign the SOW. So, and we're back to the scenario.
So, Bill, it's nice to get on a phone call with you again. How's it going?
Oh, good, just busy as ever. Tax season's coming, and you know what that means, just 18-hour days, Oh, yeah, I hear ya.
That's definitely very, very busy for tax professionals at that time. I can only imagine. My aunt's actually a CPA, so she's always busy at this time of year.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely true.
So, Bill, I'm sure you're very busy, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to set this call up so that you could ask any questions about the deliverables, whether it's the SOW or the project plan or the high-level design document. I'm not really sure if you've seen those types of documents before, so yeah, I just want to get your feedback on them.
You know what, Trainee 01, I thought they were really great. I didn't actually anticipate them being so long. I mean, geez, you really like to write, I'll say that. Is that something that you guys do for every project, or what's the deal there?
Well, yeah, we like to make sure that we give you all the details. So therefore, if you ever wanted to do some research or follow up with us, you have all of the details you'd ever want to understand exactly why we're doing the solution in the way that we're doing it.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess for me, let me just pull up one of these documents again. Kind of saved this the other day. Yeah, the project plan looked good. What else was there? Oh, you know what? I should probably pull those documents up, huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's fine. We can look at it together. No big deal.
All right, well, let me see here. I've got them somewhere. Oh, let's see. Oh, I forgot I did actually save them to my computer. Let me actually open them up again. Yeah, so the high level design, is that something that I need to be concerned with understanding these, this like technical jargon as far as, all this stuff about Ring Central and all that? I mean, I'm assuming I'm going to be trained on all this stuff. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the high level design, I would say, yeah, I mean, oftentimes customers will find it's not, super useful because it goes into a lot of detail, but it's, again, if you want to look at that stuff, it's fine. The SOW is a little bit more specific and just gets into kind of this is what we're going to do, this is how much it's going to cost. So oftentimes that's actually what the customer really cares about the most. I can kind of go over the HLD in more detail if you'd like. That would totally be fine.
Oh gosh, I don't know if I feel like falling asleep. I mean, I'm not into this technical stuff, if you know what I mean.
Well, there's a reason that I like doing this stuff and you like doing taxes, right? It takes all types to make the world go round.
Yep, exactly. So I think we can just go ahead and skip this HLD. I think I can honestly say I will never read this document again. It's just way too long, and I really don't care about this technical stuff. But I really appreciate the fact that you seem to really care about this and you put all this due diligence in. I mean, it clearly shows that you guys have a really good process. So that's great. It makes me feel good about the whole project.
Well, great. I'm glad that that answered all your questions, Bill. Now, do you have questions about the SOW or anything? Did that all make sense as far as the cost? I just wanted to give you this opportunity.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the costs were the same as what I'd seen on the proposal, and, of course, I wasn't loving that it's going to cost me this much money, but it makes sense as to why we're doing it and all that because I need to have better infrastructure. So that makes sense. At this point, I feel comfortable, moving forward. So what's the next step then?
Well, Bill, I'm glad that you feel that way. The next step is simply to sign the HLD and the SOW, and then once you send me the signed version, I'll send you the executed version, which is the one that I'll sign also. So once we both sign, that'll be the executed version, and then after that, we can move forward. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. I think that's about it. Really, I don't have any other questions. So
All right, Bill. Well, I really appreciate you jumping on this phone call, and we'll talk soon. Click and call.
so that was it. So at this point, you've done a good job as a technician. You've put everything together. The customer is happy, which is huge, right? Because ultimately, that's the reason you're going to get paid is if the customer's happy and they sign the SOW. But you have not actually gotten paid yet. So that's going to be the next step. Is in the next video we're going to go over the process to actually, sign the document and send it over, which isn't rocket science. You've already seen that before, but we're going to just go through the whole paces of this project, right? So that's the end of this video. Hopefully that was very informative and you're starting to see how the whole process works. If you have any questions, of course, again, ask your trainer. And that's it. I will talk to you soon. Thanks.